My name is Joe Forte. I work for Virginia Tech Publishing at the University Libraries of Virginia Tech, and I'm with Dr. Edward Gitre, the project director for the American Soldier Project, who is also an assistant professor of history at Virginia Tech. And today, Dr. Gitre and I will be speaking with three of the more prolific Zooniverse transcribers for the American Soldier Project. They are Bob Vandenbush, Christian Mobley, and Marie Eklid. Welcome, everyone. And if you could just go around the circle in the order that I introduced you and say who you are, where you're zooming in from, and a little bit about how you became involved in American Soldier.
Good morning. My name's, as I said, Bobby Vandenbush. I'm in Dallas, Texas. I retired from General Motors about 10 years ago. I'm a veteran of the Air Force and the Army Reserve. And I got involved with the American Soldier after the University of Michigan project was completed. And I was looking for something to occupy my time. And I had originally gone to the Civil War project where they were recording documents from the Civil War. But the script at that time, the handwriting was very difficult to read. And it was shortly within a few days, I discovered the American Soldier Project, and having a father that served in World War II caught my interest. And from there, it went to over 9,000 transcriptions. It was a lot of fun.
My name is Chris Mobley, and I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. I injured my back 16 years ago, and I was always looking for something to keep my mind busy. And when I found Zooniverse, I had done many projects, but when I found the American Soldier, it really hit me because my dad is a big fan of history, and I love history, and my grandparents were in it. But I do it to keep my mind busy, to help me with my pain. It actually helps to keep my mind off the pain. And I've really enjoyed learning a lot of things that I actually didn't know about, or things that maybe they don't talk about.
It's just after 4 o'clock in Newcastle upon Tyne in the afternoon. I'm retired. I love history. I found the war diaries on Zooniverse for World War I. Interested in that because my grandfather lied about his age, and he signed up and went to the Boer War as a rifleman, and then served with the Rifle Brigade in World War I. Then that finished, and I discovered this project. Didn't know anything about the Americans in World War II, but have really enjoyed transcribing the pages. Very educational, enlightening, interesting, and very sad at the same time. So it's a pity it's nearly at its end.
So it's interesting. I know that what I have found with my students, I mean, obviously you're a little younger, is that for many people, there's a personal connection with a relative who served. And what's been interesting to me is that I have a disability myself, and there have been multiple people who connected to the project through their disability in one way or another. And for me, that's been really encouraging because, so I have a hearing disability, and my own personal involvement in the project is, it doesn't have the same effect of taking my mind off it as, but nevertheless, the fact that I can, you know, sit quietly and I don't have to listen to somebody while I'm doing the work on this project. Yeah. So for me, and it also helps me to connect with the veterans who, you know, come home with so many of their own disabilities. And so we're coming up on VE Day, and it's our the third VE Day anniversary for the project. We started on VE Day in 2018. We had a transcribe-a-thon in 2019, and now we're finishing the project. And as we were thinking about, you know, what are we going to do for VE Day, because it looks like we're coming up on the end, I told the team that we needed to transition, and this is a great thing, from a drive to a celebration to the end. And from the beginning of those conversations, I had all of you in mind because of how long you've been involved in the project and your dedication and your work. And I just immediately thought we need to center this around the contributors on Zooniverse to the project, because literally without you, this would not have happened. So I wanted to start there, just to start with my own appreciation for the work that you've done. And I think one of the things that has captured my attention on the Zooniverse talk boards is some of your comments about individual documents that you've encountered, and seeing the effect that it's had on you and the way that you've thought about the war. And that's been, it's been, I don't want to say a lifeline, but it's definitely helped to inject life along the way. So I would love to hear you now talk about some of these documents. And I think that's really important, because we're doing this not only to celebrate, but also to talk about the power of crowdsourcing and involving the public in these kinds of projects. And for me, if there's a mutual value in that, yes, you're contributing to something that's ultimately going to be made available to the public, and that's a public good, and there's value to that, but also for you personally, that you're getting something out of it. And I thought, what better way to round that circle and to bring it back to the origins, but to have you talk about something that was meaningful for you. So why don't we start in reverse order, and from the introductions. And if you want to just talk about like something you encounter, it could be a specific document or an idea or a theme or anything, I would love for you to talk about it. And I'll just ask a couple of questions after each one. So rather than have everyone mention the document and have the conversation, we'll start with one document, we'll mention something, I'll ask a couple of questions, then we'll go to the others. How's that sound?
Fine.
Yeah, okay, go for it. Do you want to go ahead and start, Marie?
Oh yes, I'll start. I was surprised at how many gripes they all had against the officers. Too much favoritism, too many clicks, couldn't get their ratings, couldn't get their promotions. The officers were allowed to have jeeps and drivers to go into town. The enlisted men had to go into town and come back before curfew. The officers could have women back at the posts. A lot of favoritism. They all complained about the poor food, the poor medical attention, the poor dental treatment. And when they were on the Pacific Islands, the conditions were terrible. They didn't have enough fresh food, not enough rations, no milk. Couldn't wait to get out and get back to the States. But really, a lot of them said they should have been replaced by other troops, so they weren't kept on the Pacific Islands so long. And it really made me think, I never knew what all the conditions were like on those islands in the Pacific and in other places. And it made you realize what they suffered and went through. And a lot of them suffered from malaria, which was rife. Some of them had it for 12 to 14 times. But a lot of them didn't want to take the medication, the Atraban, because they said it could affect them having children in later life. So they'd rather not use it and just try to get over it. I thought that was a shame really, that they had to stay over there and be ill and couldn't be sent back. That surprised me a lot.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that surprised not only the people who conducted these surveys, but also the Army, was that in the first planning survey that was started the day after Pearl Harbor, they discovered that the Army of World War II was very different from the one who fought, the Army that fought in World War I, and it was much more educated. They had a higher education, they had higher expectations. And one of the huge problems that really quickly emerged was this difference between the enlisted men and the officers, because you had lots of soldiers who came into the Army who were really well educated and had high expectations. And so there was a lot of friction. I think that's one of the things that really surprised me, at least caught my attention when I first encountered these documents, was the animosity toward the officers. And they would talk about not wanting to be treated like a dog. And I noticed that it was both white enlisted men and African American Black soldiers. And they were using some of the very same language to talk about this hostility to the officer class. So that struck me as well. So, Marie, was there anything about the actual act of transcribing that affected you? I mean, one of the things I tell my students that it's important not just to read sources about World War II, but the actual act of transcribing, I feel like, connects you in a different way than just reading a printed page. Was that the same? Did you have that encounter or experience?
Well, I've always enjoyed history and reading things, and I've always enjoyed working on the keyboard because I'm a touch typist, and it was really like reading a book. Really, it was very, very interesting. As I said before, very sad, but I really enjoyed typing it all out. And if I was stuck for anything, some American expressions I'd never heard of, I just Googled it. And if there was different things that happened that I hadn't heard of, I just Googled it, which is a great tool. I suppose that's cheating really, but that was quite a good way to do it. I did find, though, on the last rolls that have been on, although the writing looked very good, the pages were very blurred, and it was a shame they were so blurred, because even with the I can't remember the name of it now, the Chrome tool, which I found quite a few years ago, to lighten it and darken it.
Yeah.
You just couldn't do anything with the pages because they were too blurred. And I suppose after all those years, it was something that couldn't be helped because the documents would have been really old.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed the talk pages where you could interact with people, and it meant you weren't working on your own.
Yeah.
So I've thoroughly enjoyed it, really enjoyed it.
It's wonderful.
I'll have to find another project. I have to keep something. I have to keep the brain working, especially at this time. It stops you worrying about this virus going around the world. I can come on the computer and just switch off completely.
Yeah.
And forget about what's going on at the moment. Takes your mind off it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I would go back and forth. I would see the COVID statistics, but then I would go back to Zooniverse and see our progress there. And it was therapy.
Yes. Yeah. Really good.
Some positive statistics.
Yes.
That's really wonderful. How about, Christian, how about for you?
I was born in 1973, and I was never really around racism. And if you watch movies and read books, I never read much about it in the military. And there was something in African Americans that he said, as a whole, we are not being treated as humans, more like slaves and animals. I was surprised that even though the African Americans and whites were fighting together for the same thing, the blacks were still being treated badly. And then the other side of it, a white soldier put, I think we would win this war much quicker if colored soldiers had the same chances as whites.
Wow.
I was surprised that, I guess I never thought of it, being born after the race riots and things like that. I would think if whoever's fighting with me, we would be on the same terms. But I think the African Americans were fighting for much more than the whites were fighting for, in a way. Mm-hmm. But I was still surprised at how they were treated so badly. And I know they said a lot of, like, the southern blacks were sent to the northern sites, and they were treated differently when they would go there. But that really, I just never thought about it. I'm sure people that, maybe were older than I am who, went through some of it, but I never realized that they were treated that differently as a whole while they were fighting. That really touched me greatly.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Didn't think about it, I guess.
Yeah. When I first encountered these documents in 2009, that's one of the things that really struck me when I first started going through them. I saw a number from the African American soldiers and Black soldiers, and the deep, deep feeling of inequality and how they experienced it, and the fact that they could speak so frankly or write so frankly about them,
Right.
so you would have really well-spoken responses and very logical and rational, but even through the ones that you had to decipher because the spelling was awful and you knew that this was a struggle, you just really felt that individual pain. Like, how, you're expecting me to fight for democracy and I'm treated like a slave.
Yeah. And it's amazing because, they were all in it together. And it would just bring tears to my eyes because as all the white soldiers are complaining of how bad everything else is, as Marie said, these African-American soldiers are being treated so badly. They're feeling it tons worse in a sense. And I just wonder, after the war, I wonder how certain whites may have thought about the African Americans afterwards, after seeing them fight with them and being in the foxholes together and things like that.
Yes, yeah, legit. It's a really good question. I think, part of the reason the civil rights movement took place when it did, had so much to do with World War II.
Yeah.
And I think for both sides, I think for lots of white soldiers, they came back and, some of them became very hardened in their racial views, but also a lot of them, I think it did change their mind. You can see that reflected in these sources, how the experience did change their minds.
I also wonder too if they, go ahead, Bob.
Excuse me. I was going to say I could comment or elaborate on Christian's comment about racism in the military. When I went into the military, it was about a little over 20 years after the desegregation of the armed forces. And my first duty assignment after leaving tech school was in Libya, North Africa. And at that time, I was a one-striper, E1. So we had an enlisted men's club. And that club was shut down just about every week because of race problems. White soldiers and black airmen fighting one another. And that's 22, maybe 23 years after the services were desegregated. There were still racial problems in the military.
Sad.
Wow. Thanks for that, Bobby. So, but what about you, Bobby V? I mean, is that what's, I know that in some of your talkboard posts that you talked about racial issues and talked a little about your own experience. For you, is that what drew you and what interested you most, or what kind of document had the most effect on you, or kind of source?
Well, the one document that comes to mind is regarding Emmett Till, the young black man that was lynched because he had whistled at a white woman. When I did the Google research, come to find out, his father was executed in Italy for rape. And during his trial, Emmett Till's trial, I can only imagine that this like father, like son was used to help railroad this young man. That one document comes to mind more than any others. But I will say, I guess I was fortunate enough, I was what they called a REMF. And I won't transcribe that for you because it's has some pejoratives in it. But I was, with the Armed Forces Radio and Television, I was non-combat status. So I can tell you, in a non-combat status, generally, I would think the racial overtones were a little more severe. In a foxhole, when you're being shot at and somebody's got your back, it doesn't matter what color they are. But being non-combat status, I believe that the incidents of racial prejudice were probably a lot more prevalent among non-combat soldiers than those on the front line. And I think probably our experience in Vietnam would show that to be true.
Yeah. So one of the interesting results of the research was that there was a general widespread assumption that if you integrated the rank and file, that it would kill morale. And one of the things that they found from the research, which backs up what Bobby V says, is that there was some de facto desegregation, not at the squad level, but above that. And one of the things that they discovered was that seeing African American soldiers perform in combat had a very positive effect on not only racial views but also on morale. And that research that they did helped to desegregate the military. So there's a direct connection from these sources that you transcribed historically to desegregation in the civil rights movement. And so you see a lot of that animosity and hatred on the African American side for the fact that they had to fight, but also ultimately seeing their performance on the battlefield did help to change minds, not only of fellow soldiers, but also of higher command.
Well, the similar situation with the Japanese Americans, the Nisei.
Yeah.
The Nisei outfit that was sent to Europe to fight.
Yep. Yeah.
While their parents and their relatives were incarcerated in the internment camps out in the West.
Yeah, yeah. So I think we just have a couple more minutes here, right, Joe?
Yeah, sure. As long as we want to go naturally, but.
Yeah, yeah. So these are specific documents. I wonder, I want to encourage other people, especially during this time, to be involved in crowdsourcing. And Zooniverse, I've been really thrilled and impressed with Zooniverse and their team and the project. And hello. So, what would you say to other people who are watching this who are on the front end and they haven't transcribed all these documents? There's science projects, obviously, that's the base of the projects in Zooniverse, but there are now other military history and humanities projects. What would you say to them, to the people who've not done these transcription projects, the value and what it's meant for you?
Well, I've been involved in a number of, one of I think was Planet Hunters, and then there was a LIGO looking for gravity waves. I've always had a fondness for science, and I thought if there's a way I can contribute, and I know there's a lot of projects and there's only so many research dollars available. So if you can broom a lot of that work out to a volunteer, so much the better. And I've found my times involved with those scientific projects to be as rewarding as the American soldier. But it's been my very great pleasure to have been able to contribute my own small way to helping promote things like the American soldier and these other science projects.
Yeah, wonderful.
No, I'm totally opposite. I tried some. I love science. I love space, but I tried those and I just couldn't. I don't know. I guess you're looking for things that may be there, and I think they're a lot difficult for some people other than just typing what you see. I'm really interested in getting other people that are disabled into this to keep their mind off of their disabilities like I have. It has helped me immensely. And the different projects I've done, I always do the history ones. I like those. I've done a couple because I'm a pastor. I found a man from 1800s whose messages were in a library, and I typed those out. It's just stuff like that. But I just have found it really changed my life 3 years ago when I found it. I wish I'd have found it sooner.
Oh, wonderful. That's terrific to hear. Marie?
I really enjoyed it. I learned it was very educational. It's a shame nearly finished, but I'll try another Zooniverse project. I did try before the American Soldier. I went on to the Anzacs. I did quite a few on that, but I made a stupid mistake. I didn't sign in, so my work was wasted. So I might go back to that and sign in properly. I don't know how I did that, but I did.
I don't think it was wasted. I mean, you might not get great, but they'll take your work whether your name's on it or not.
That was a shame. But never mind. Had a senior moment then. Oh dear.
No. Well, yeah, go ahead.
As I say, it was really interesting. I really enjoyed it. Maybe they'll put some more things on Zooniverse that connect with history, where you can transcribe. I'll just keep looking, but I will find another project because I like to keep occupied. And this has been a nice experience here, seeing people and talking to them, especially yourself. I've enjoyed it.
That's wonderful.
We enjoyed it.
There's you know, these sources are from the National Archive, and they have a citizen archivist page. If you go to theirs, you'll see some history ones as well. And we're going to be working toward the editorial phase of our project, and we'll talk to you about that in a minute. You know, for me, so this project started in the classroom, and I had my students transcribe because I wanted them to see the individual soldiers' experience and to read primary sources and to really engage with them. But when we moved to Zooniverse, it was really interesting because I saw the value of the public's involvement, very similar to what I was seeing in the classroom with my students, and it helped to bring down the wall between the classroom, as I've said to a number of people, the classroom and the public. You know, but you know, as a professional historian, oftentimes you think about people consuming your books or your articles, and you're the one that produces history, and the public reads it. But for me, this was really transformative, and I came to appreciate that the public is producing history. So even Marie, you didn't get credit on Zooniverse for not being signed in. That you and the other Zooniverse contributors and my students who participate in the project, what they're doing is incredibly valuable because they're not just consuming what other people have written about World War II or about these other subjects, but they are contributing and helping to produce history for years to come. I was at a conference for the Society for Military History, and the chairman for the National Endowment for Humanities was there. And he mentioned the project. He was talking about their support for military history. And he said, to paraphrase, that dissertations will come out of this project. And as I was there in the audience, of course, I was really pleased to see the chairman there and talking about the project. But when he said that, I mean, I can't help but think about the Zooniverse community and how instrumental all of you have been, and then the thousands of other contributors in making that possible. Like, those dissertations and books could not be written out of the project if it weren't for what you did. So for me personally, I'm so incredibly grateful, and especially in this time of a pandemic and a crisis. You know, at first I was a little concerned because we had this really ambitious goal. When we got to early March, I was like, I think we're gonna make it. It might go a little bit over. If we get it done in May, it'll still be fine. But then when I saw the uptick, I was just relieved. But then I also understood that in this really dark period, you know, people could continue to contribute and carry on during this really dark and anxiety-induced period. So I'm especially grateful in this period, your continued involvement. And when we do launch the project at the very end, obviously you're going to know about it, but I hope you do feel the same sense of pride that I will in what you've done to make it all possible, because I think it's a large undertaking involving thousands of people, but in the end, for years to come, people are going to benefit from what you've done. So thank you so much.
Been a
Thank you for
pleasure.
giving us the opportunity.
Yep.
It's been my pleasure.